Yeah. Okay, great. Thanks. Hello, folks. Those of you joining us via Facebook Live today, it's Everold Reid of the Reid Method Insider podcast, just getting ready here to start our episode 42 with Mr. Eikenberry, Kevin Eikenberry. So we'll do our formal introductions for the audio of the podcast. And
real quick, it's asking me to unmute, but I don't think you want me to do that. So I'm going to stay muted.
I can hear you okay, but wonder if the audience can.
Yeah, unmute it and let's get a check.
Yeah, unmute yours for a sec.
And just keep the volume down.
And just keep, yeah. And as long as your volume, yeah, then it's good. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, then we're good.
All right.
Perfect. Welcome, everybody, to the Reid Method Insider podcast. It's episode number 42. And today we'll be talking about how to master the art of remote sales through sales leadership, remote sales leadership. It's a big deal today in many industries worldwide. And, I actually have some 8 years of experience traveling the continent, all across North America and doing sales and marketing, with a remote sales team. So I'm here today and we're here in studio today for episode 42 to learn from an expert who will give us a lot of great tips and strategies on being successful and how to manage sales teams and business remotely across the world. So without further ado, Kevin Eikenberry is the founder and Chief Potential Officer. I love your title, Kevin. Chief Potential Officer of the Kevin Eikenberry Group. He's been named one of Inc. magazine's top 100 leadership and management experts in the world, folks. So we've got a good guest on here tonight, so make sure you're listening. And is the author of several books, including The Remarkable Leadership. Kevin and Wayne Turnell have co-authored a recent book, Authorized Guide to Leading Remote Sales Team. And there it is, folks, on the screen. The Long Distance Leader, Rules for Remarkable Remote Leadership. And in this episode, and that's why tonight we're very happy to have Kevin on the show tonight as he shares his expertise on how to master the art of remote sales leadership. So welcome to the show, Kevin.
I'm glad to be with you. I've been writing about leadership and working with leaders for many years. And this book I'm excited about because I'm also doing it every day. So I've got a team of folks spread across the United States and a few folks that work here in this building. No one's here now except me, but some that work here and some that don't, and some that are never here and some that are here some of the time. And I think that's the world that a lot of people find themselves living in these days.
They most certainly do. And kudos to your staff as well. They were very good in keeping in touch, and they were very professional from the contact the young lady I've been dealing with.
I'm glad to hear that. I'll make sure she knows.
Yes. So congratulations on that. You sounds like, and I've checked out your websites. Those of you folks can go to kevineikenberry.com, right?
Yep. kevineikenberry.com is a great place to go.
Well, perfect. So here we go, folks. We want to talk about how to master the art of remote sales leadership and to run sales teams and businesses remotely all across the world. And it's a very relevant topic today in business and in sales. So we'll jump into this right away with Kevin on what led you to specialize in this segment of remote leadership, communication, and team management.
Well, we've been in the leadership development business for a very long time. And I think what led us to this particular book and for us to create the Remote Leadership Institute, which is a part of one of the brands in our business, is the fact that this is where we are. And a lot of people sort of didn't realize, it's like you walk into your office one day and there's offices here and there's offices there. And some of them there are people in and some of them there aren't, but it's not like they're never there. They're there sometimes, twice a week they're there, right? And then you notice that half of your team is never there. And so we've found ourselves in a world where most people, many folks are leading teams that are remote. Now, in some industries, we've still got folks on a shop floor and everyone's there. More and more, and this genie is out of the bottle. More and more, this is what the world's going to look like: is people leading teams that not everyone's in the same place. And so, as a part of our work in helping leaders we felt like this was the right time to bring this book to the world, because no one's really written this book. No one's really talking about it in quite this way. And so we're excited to have the chance to share with leaders around the world about how to do this better.
Excellent. So have you been yourself a remote sales person or manager? How much time have you spent out there grinding it, so to speak?
Well, I was a salesperson. Well, so let's put it this way. First of all, my business is almost 25 years old, and it doesn't matter how big the business is. I'm a salesperson. So there's 25 years. And before that, several years when my title was salesperson when I worked at a Fortune 10. So I worked as a salesperson, calling on people remotely that weren't all nearby. I didn't see them all every day. And then I had the chance to sell remotely from a corporate office for a while. And then I've been selling and leading a sales team as a part of my overall organization for a very long time.
So this has been a huge shift. And this is, I remember when it started, or I could remember when colleagues of mine started working remotely, and they'd say, I'm working from home today. And I'm like, how do you get to work from home? That must be nice. And, how do you have the discipline to get up, get dressed, get prepared, and go sit at the computer, and root out the distractions and kids or other relatives and people hanging around? How does that really work?
Well, the interesting thing is that most of the research actually proves that people are more productive working from home than they are in the office. So yes, you described some distractions that clearly can be there. And yeah, people need to get focused. And there's some things that we could talk about how they set up their office and setting up ground rules with everyone at home and all that. But beyond that, I often will ask people, so have you ever worked the week between Christmas and New Year's in the office? And people go, yeah. And they get this big smile on their face. Mm-hmm. So, well, what's that like? So, man, I got more done that week than any other week of the year. Why? Well, I wasn't distracted. There weren't a bunch of people interrupting me all day long. And so the people working from home, that's every day, right? I mean, yeah, they're getting some email and such, but the fact is there's no one popping over their cubicle. There's not 25 people interruptions. There's not, hey, there's cake in the break room. There's not any of that. Now, there's some downsides to some of that. The fact is that most of the research says we're actually more productive at home. Yeah, there's people that may have to work on their discipline. They have to set up some ground rules and that sort of thing, of course. But everything else being equal, people are actually very productive at home because they've got fewer distractions. And they often work more hours. They actually, good or bad, they often work the time they would have otherwise been commuting through all that Toronto traffic.
Exactly. Yeah. And that sometimes we use it as an excuse, but it is absolutely real. So listen, we absolutely can appreciate that. And especially when you're working from home, it's all the ceaseless solicitations on your time, smoke breaks, coffee breaks, everybody talking about what happened over the weekend. Everybody's got a story, especially on Monday morning. So, and those who talk about sports teams and their favorite this and favorite that. And by the time when you take a look, hours have gone by and the productivity. So we know that in North America, there's huge productivity loss with distraction and people in their offices. How has anyone done any type of comparison or comparative with field reps, so to speak, versus the productivity of office reps?
Well, so I can't speak to sales specifically in this regard, but Harvard Business Review did a study that really got at that exact point about productivity. And as I said earlier, the research shows that people are more productive working from home than in the office. However, we got to put a big asterisk besides that. And in sales, this may be okay, but the big asterisk is this: people get really productive about the work that they see as being theirs. People can get very insular, and they can get very personally siloed. So if I'm doing that work and I'm making sales calls, great. And yet I still am a part of this team back in the office. Mm-hmm. And I still need to make sure that I'm connected with and collaborating with other people on the team, the folks that are assisting me in the sales process, maybe with some technical folks. And if I get too insular, even though I may think I'm getting a lot done, there's stuff that I'm missing. And that's the job of the leader, to set a clearer set of expectations Everold, about what it is that the job really is. And so as long as we take care of that and we can help people think through the collaboration piece, then we can get big productivity gains from people working from home.
So in this research, when you and your co-author were putting the book together, did you come across any issues or challenges that one would find, or what's the most common challenge that one finds managing a team remotely from thousands or hundreds of miles away?
Well, there are lots of challenges. And I was on a webinar earlier today with several hundred people, and I asked that question and they kept flowing in, right? So there are lots of challenges. The biggest ones really are around, I think, four things. How do I communicate better with those folks at a distance? How do I coach those people at a distance? How do I build relationships with those people at a distance? And how do I help collaboration happen, as we've already talked about a little bit. So I think most of the issues end up falling into those four categories: communication, coaching, relationship building, trust building, et cetera, and collaboration. And, we could take all of those things and talk about them very directly as it relates to a sales rep and the relationships and the communication that they need to have with their customers as well. So those, I think, most of the biggest challenges fall into those four areas.
So how do you manage teamwork then? Teamwork is a big part of any company's success. And when the team is spread thin, how is that managed differently to say, yeah, we still have a team?
Well, so first of all, as long as we have a common purpose and everyone understands that common purpose, then we can say we truly need to have a team. We don't have a group of individual contributors out there. We really do need a team. So that's the first thing. But once we get past that, then it really comes down to the leader having very clear expectations with each individual and with the team as a whole. Now, that would be true for any leader anytime. But mostly we think about expectations around what's the work, what's the quality of the work, and that's how we define, what's the quota or whatever, right? Mm-hmm. Now, the difference when the team members or some of the team members are remote is that we need expectations around the how. So we need expectations about how we're going to communicate, what tools we're going to use, the frequency that we're going to use, the importance of that collaboration, why that collaboration matters. So we've got to have a broader conversation and clearer mutual expectations with everybody about what success in this job really is. See, there are lots of folks that are good salespeople, but a leader would say, but they're not really doing a great job because they see their job as sales being this, and the leader sees their job as bigger than that, right? Absolutely. And so that is harder for people to see. That bigger box that is the real job is harder for people to see when they're out there by themselves. And they don't see the inner workings. They don't see those interconnections. And so it becomes our job as a leader to be even more clear about making that all clear for people.
That nicely to the next question is, how do you know when you're hiring someone that they would potentially be a good fit or a good field sales rep or a good leader?
I think there's two things as it relates to what do we need to do differently about hiring when people are remote, when they're going to be working remotely versus when they're going to work in the office. And I think the two big issues. One is we need to do the sort of the standard stuff that we would do in any interview around recognizing that that's now a part of the job. So part of the interview should be about that stuff. Right? Have you worked from home before? Have you dealt with that? Can you discipline yourself to get up and get out of your bunny slippers, et cetera, right? So there's some interview questions that you want to include, recognizing that the work is going to be different, right? Do you have experience with it? What's that going to look like? What has your experience been? How successful have you been? All of that stuff. That's pretty simple and straightforward. The other piece is this. I'm going to be needing to communicate with that remote person. And so part of the interview process ought to be done remotely. Yeah. I mean, even if the person you're going to hire is in Toronto and then you're going to send them off to Calgary or something, right?
Yeah.
And then part of the interview, though, shouldn't all be in the office, because after that, they're not going to be in the office. So we ought to be having the conversation using webcams like you and I are doing right now, so that how comfortable are they with that? How well, I mean, can they manage the technology? I mean, certainly they can learn that, but we need to get a sense for how comfortable they are using the tools and the technology. I'm going to incorporate in their own space. I'm going to incorporate some email communication so I can get a sense of how effective they are in email. I'm going to do some things that start to give me a clue in real life about how they'll operate in that way. And then if that person is going to be leading remotely, then there's obviously some leadership questions in there as well. But fundamentally, I need to expand my bank of interview questions to talk about that reality.
Yeah.
And I need to put them in the situation and have a chance to observe and judge based on that.
So what would you say are some of the mistakes that leaders would make in this process and the potential hire or salesperson or field person would make?
Well, one of the mistakes that the sales leader or the sales manager might make is the person says they've worked remotely, or they think, oh, that's fine, people are going to work from home. And then they don't really give them any coaching. There's no real support or resources for helping them set themselves up to succeed at home. Now, depending on the nature of the work, there may be someone show up with technology to set up a laptop and blah, 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 all that. But there's more than that, like giving them some guidance about how to set the ground rules and expectations with everybody else at home and as the door closed and all that stuff, as well as expectations around how to shut down as opposed to just keep working. So I think there's a bunch of stuff that leaders can do to help people be successful when they're doing it remotely when maybe they haven't before. That's the first thing that I would say is that we got to help them be successful in that regard. And we got to set really clear expectations about what we want them to do once they're there.
And then from the salesperson, the field person's perspective, what is one common mistake that they make, that the ones that typically don't make it past probation or don't last? What's typically the one thing that kills the whole process?
Well, I would say two things. One is the same thing that kills the process if they're in the office, and that is having good discipline skills, having good skills of focus, and that sort of thing, right? So that, I think, doesn't necessarily change regardless of where someone's sitting. But I think the other one that gets in the way is they get so insular and they're so focused on themselves that they lose sight of the fact that they are on a sales team. They are a part of a larger group. They also may not make it through because they haven't figured out how to or tried to find a mentor. If you're working in a sales team in an office, most people are savvy enough to find somebody that they can sort of cozy up to learn the ropes from, to have, be a mentor, right? Informal or formal mentor. And if we're not setting that up as the leader for them or making that happen when they're out there and not seeing anybody, it may be harder for them to even remember they ought to, or to be proactive enough to go make it happen.
Yeah, and that happens a lot too. I see that happen a lot in dealership, in the auto dealership space that I work in, where salespeople are hired and they're pretty much just thrown to the wolves to fend for themselves.
Here's your desk.
Yeah. There's your office or desk. They're the cars and they're the brochures, and you're kind of on your own. So that does happen, and that's reality. And it's up to the salesperson or the new hire to say, look, let me find that mentor, or who's the number one guy here, who's the manager that I can meet with and pick their brain to learn from. What books should I read? What courses should I take? What videos should I watch? So it's no different if you're working remotely, is the discipline. And you and I we're always, I got a day job, but I go home and I work and nobody tells me what to do, and I still am number one. So it's the discipline, obviously.
Well, and again, when they're remote, some of those things that might happen more naturally or more simply just won't, unless that person is really proactive, right? Some of the people that are watching or listening to us are that proactive person because they're watching or listening to us, right? Yeah. But the mistake that we make, those of us who are more highly self-motivated, who are high producers, who are lifelong learners, forget is that not everybody operates that way. So we can't just let that person go out and be successful like we might have, because they may not. And that doesn't make them less of a possible success. It just means that we can't assume everyone sees the world the way we see it. And again, that's just exacerbated if the person's not going to be around other salespeople. They're going to be out on their own.
Exactly. So with the advancement with technology and video technology and screen sharing, just like we're doing now, Many people are teleworking, so to speak, remotely. And we all know that it can work in inbound sales or simple product transactional calls. But how do you maintain authenticity and connection when you speak over the phone to build consultative relationships?
Well, I do that today some of the time, right? It's not my full-time job because I've got this whole business to run and podcasts to be on and books to write and all those sorts of things. But I'm doing that today. And if I go back into my history, as we talked about briefly, I did that before. And I think the key is, here's the first thing I would say. When I was doing it before, all I had was a phone. Mm-hmm. Well, and a fax machine.
Remember what those are, folks?
If you don't know what it is, just Google it, everybody. You can find it. Just put a piece of paper and it makes this funny noise. But the thing that we have now that I think most salespeople probably aren't using enough is what we're doing right now, which is the webcam. Because the webcam is the next best thing to being across the table.
Yeah.
Because right now, you and I had a phone conversation a week or so ago. Yes. And then we had never met. And now we've been on this conversation and it's different. We can see each other's body language. We can see the smiles. We can see we have a better chance of not interrupting each other in this context, but just having those cues and those clues. And so I tell you what, I believe that high producers are going to be figuring out how to use these technologies, not just to do a sales presentation, right? So I can show them the PowerPoint slides. There's a whole conversation there perhaps
on its own. Yeah.
But how do I build the relationship? By connecting with people in multiple ways, right? And we ought to be using multiple technologies to do that. Sending emails, of course, handwritten notes, for sure, phone calls, of course, but also using these kinds of technologies so we can build trust and relationships and connection and have more effective communication.
Yeah, and it took me a while to get used to and familiar with all this technology, but you just need to start. And yes, you will make some mistakes initially and it may not work and it may crash and burn for a couple of times. But if you keep doing it, it's no different than getting used to a regular laptop or your cell phone. Eventually you'll be an expert at it. I mean, I'm no expert by any means. That's why I'm in a studio where somebody else is pushing the buttons. But
right.
But
well, let me say two things about that. Sometimes people say, well, I don't like to be on the webcam. And there's some people that don't like to be on the webcam because they're working from home and they don't really want people to know that they were in their AC/DC t-shirt and their hair's all messed up, right? And there's some advantages for people working home if that's the case. But if the expectation is we're going to use our webcam, fire up our webcams, then people need to recognize that. It's just like coming to work. And they can still you don't know what I'm wearing below here, right? But here's the other thing. The other piece of that is that people say, well, I don't like to look at myself. Well, so don't. Look at the other person, right? Just look at the other person. I actually believe there's some value in occasionally being able to look at yourself because you can get a little bit of feedback on how, do I look like I'm paying attention? Do I look like I'm engaged? But really my focus is on you and not on me. I happen to see myself if I want, make sure that my hands aren't going way out of the screen or that kind of thing. But that's the other thing. Then the other part about the technology itself is, if you take on a new sales role and you're going to be working remotely, then make sure you know which technology your company's using, and then practice with a teammate. Get those 3 or 4 bad ones out of the way before you get on with the sales call with a customer. I mean, that almost should go without being said, and yet it happens all the time. People don't really know how to use the technology, and then, I got to have this sales meeting, I got to have this presentation, and then I'm trying to figure it out on the fly. Well, that's just not very wise. Well, I'll be nice. It's just not wise. No. So do a little practice.
I think one of the other examples or benefits of doing this and practicing too is you get to see yourself in a professional light, and you get to work on yourself, whether you dress differently, position yourself, how you look, how you listen. I think it tells you, it gives you a learning experience as well, and clues as to how to present yourself to somebody else.
Well, and to think about it as a development tool, pretty much any one of these tools, like what you and I are using now, or any others that you would have in your organization, have a button that you can push record. And so that gives you the advantage of hitting record. Of course, if it's with a customer, you want to make sure they're okay with that. But even if just in those practice sessions, hit that record, then you can go back and watch it and give yourself some feedback and do some personal coaching with yourself as well.
So as a renowned speaker and multi-time author, how many books have you published now, by the way?
This is, I think, number 5 or 6, and then I'm a contributing author to about 20 others.
Okay, so
I have to count 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. I think this is 6.
Well, I have some catching up to do to you. So
that's okay. That's okay.
I've only got one out, and I'm working on my second. So
the way you say that is you always. So anyone listening, this is the way you say it. You say my latest.
My latest.
That's all I gotta say. If it could be your first, but it's also your latest.
Nice. See, I learned something from you already.
There you go.
That's amazing. And so that's a great question for a multi-time author and a renowned speaker, that you've seen a number of workplace challenges with fewer people. If more are working remotely, there's fewer people in the offices and sometimes more turnover. So how can leaders, go through this breakneck pace of delivering better results, or do they deliver better results when more are out in the field remotely rather than around?
Well, they can. They don't necessarily. I mean, we believe, obviously, we wrote a book about it called The Long Distance Leader. We believe that they can, but there's certainly many that aren't, right? Because if any, as complex and difficult as leadership is, and it is,
yes,
right? It's even more so when folks aren't all in the same place. And so it really does tax the skills of leaders to another level to do this well at a distance and not just having everyone down the hall. So is it possible to have high productivity and be an effective leader and have low turnover and great results? Of course it is. No guarantee. And if you're not thinking about the nuances, the kind of things we're talking about tonight, it's not likely.
So typically, it sounds like the type of people that would be in the field are leaders, themselves, that the ideal the ideal personality would be somebody that requires very little supervision, that is obviously disciplined, committed, goal oriented.
All those things are going to help, that's for sure, right? It's going to improve the likelihood. But those are the same things I would want out of someone sitting down the hall from me.
Yes, but and I find that I've seen sales floors and teams hire people just because they need people, as opposed, I
just need a warm body, right?
Yeah, we need to let the place look like there's people working here and that the offices are full. So if you were to give advice to, you're on Inc. Magazine's top 100 sales leader coaches and authors. If you were to give advice to companies in the top 100, what sort of leadership advice would you offer that would, say, guarantee some results?
Yeah, so the last part of the book really does talk about that organizational question. And I think here's the key. Top organizations they're doing something to develop their leaders, and to which we applaud and say, go for it. And very, very few are addressing the differences of doing it remotely, right? So while you may have a robust leadership development process, you need to make sure that you're addressing the kinds of things that we're talking about in this book, the kinds of things about what do I have to do differently to communicate with my team members when I don't see them all the time? Mm-hmm. What do I have to do differently when I'm coaching someone who's not across the hall? Those kinds of things, the kinds of things we've been talking about in this call. How do I use the technology effectively? So it's organizations setting a new set of expectations and providing the skills to help people to meet those expectations.
So is the sales manager or leader asking the type of questions like, how many calls did you make today? How many sales did you make? Or are they asking the type of question that said, tell me about that particular client that you met? How did that go?
Well, I would hope at some level they have the first pieces of information without having to ask that question. That's right. And making it feel like it's a big old micromanagement mess. And hopefully the coaching is much more about the latter, right? And the much more of the conversations are about the latter. So what's working? where do you need some help? What are the new challenges you're getting? Are you getting objections we haven't had before? What kinds of help do you need? How did that call go? How did it go in comparison to the way you were expecting? What would you do differently the next time? Maybe we could ask 100 kinds of coaching questions, just a few off the top of my head.
Yeah.
And so I would like to hope that we've got a process where I, as the leader of a remote team or down the hall, that I don't have to ask you how many calls you made today. I've got a way to track that.
Absolutely.
And look at it if I need to. So that we can have a conversation that's much more than just transactional. Right? So we can have a real developmental conversation and open up the door for the conversation that you need as the salesperson or as the remote team member to get what you need from the boss.
Yes, which is leadership and sharing of responsibility.
Exactly.
and help. So in your research and all the leadership talks that you've done and all the shows that you've been on, have you found that there's one set of employees that are happier than others, or is there productivity that's better? Do they last longer? Do they have a longer shelf life? Have you come out with any of those?
I think that there are an awful lot of people that would like to work from home. It's kind of a grass is always greener scenario. There's a lot of people would like to work from home, and then once they get there, say, I'm not sure this is really what I want. I think there's some people self-aware enough to say that's not what I want.
Yeah.
Right. So I don't think that we can. I don't have any data or can point to no studies. Not to say they don't exist, but I'm not aware of them that say that engagement's higher or whatever inside versus out or all that. I will say this, however, that if we're not doing a good job as a leader, especially with our folks who are remote, the chances of them leaving goes up. And here's why. Because the number one reason people voluntarily leave a job is that they fire their boss. Mm-hmm. No matter where they work, right? So if we're not doing a good job of leading, especially if they're remote, they're more likely to be looking. And in the world currently of full employment, right, in North America, I mean, there are jobs out there. And headhunters have told us, man, you let us talk to someone who's working remotely, they're an easy one to pick off, because especially if the boss thing's not working so great and they may not feel as connected to the rest of the team. And if I can get them to go to work for company Y instead of company X, I mean, they're still working from home. Like, the barriers to change are much lower. They don't have to change their commute. They don't have to change their daycare. They don't have to change anything. They get a different laptop, a different login, and they're ready to go.
Ready the next day.
Exactly. And so there are some lower barriers, right, to people leaving. Now, I'm not saying that we should be scared of letting our folks go remote because they're all going to run away. I'm not saying that. But what I am saying is that if we're not doing a good job of leading them, there may be risks there that we haven't thought about.
So with all the data and the 25 years plus experience in the books.
You're making me sound old.
No. Hey, listen, I've been in sales 28 years and I'm still in my late 40s. I just started early. So, and I'm sure you did too.
All right. Okay.
So it's all good. 3 takeaways. If you were to, we always try to wrap up each episode with 3, maybe 1 or 2, but what are, a couple of really good takeaways that you'd say, okay, if you were to have ultimate success as a leader, as a remote leader or a remote salesperson, here's what I would do. Here's what I'd look for.
I'm going to focus on 3 things and I'm going to focus on the leader. If you're leading a remote team, here are 3 things that I want you to do. Number 1 is I want you to turn off your email and fire up your webcam. And more often, right? And right. Number 2, the second thing I want you to do is to realize that you have to be more intentional about almost everything. A lot of things that you might get some grace from people in the office, people don't even see you, they don't know. So every interaction has greater impact because there's fewer of them, right? So if you make a mistake, it's going to take you longer to overcome that, and vice versa. So fire up the webcam more, be more intentional, and be super clear about your expectations with people, not only about what they need to do, but how they're going to do it. If you do those 3 things, you'll be heading in the right direction. It's not going to get you all the way there, but it's going to get you a start. And then step number 4, buy the book. the long distance leader, right? And people just need to go to longdistanceleaderbook.com. And in fact, if they go to longdistanceleaderbook.com/podcast, we got some special gifts for people because they listen to us. But you can buy the book anywhere you want.
Anywhere you want.
For those people who are listening live, if you buy the book, then in the next couple of days on Friday, we're doing a live Q&A call with Wayne and I. And if you buy the book and go register for some other free bonuses at longdistanceleaderbook.com, you'll get access to that live call we're going to do, which is going to be 100% your questions. And we're looking forward to doing that on Friday.
I love it. So there you go, folks. Some great gifts, some great tools to help you to advance your career. And questions, you can ask Kevin questions and his co-author on Friday, right? On your webinar.
Absolutely.
Great. So, Kevin, unless you have any final takeaways, this has been great. I've certainly learned a lot. It's a great topic of discussion for the audience as we try to keep, delivering excellence in advice, in ideas from great thought leaders and authors and public figures like yourself from all over the world. So I thank you very much for, number one, for you reaching out and for everything that you're doing in contributing to everyone.
Well, it's been a pleasure to be with you. And if there's ever anything I can do to help anybody, just let us know. And again, it's a pleasure and an honor to be on your show. Thanks.
Well, thank you very much, folks. You've been listening to the Reid Method Insider Podcast. And we've been live on Facebook Live with Mr. Kevin Eikenberry. And the website is kevineikenberry.com, right?
kevineikenberry.com and longdistanceleaderbook.com.
There you go. And the book is called The Long Distance Leader.
Correct.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much, Kevin, for being on the show. Folks, you've been listening to episode 42, where Kevin and I have been talking about how to lead remotely and how to master the art of remote sales leadership and to deliver ultimate great results, both personally and in business. So thank you very much, Kevin, and we'll look forward to talking to you soon.